Someone provides you with material non-public information, I don't want to know about it. But all rules have loopholes.
In which case, the sky's the limit? The loophole makes it okay to take advantage of a friend's tragedy?
Election coverage. Here is Brian Williams.
The first two state polls have closed at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. This Decision 2000 evening, 20-0 is the early electoral count. Good evening, everyone. This is indeed, in every way and sense, a barn burner of election. You have to go back to Kennedy-Nixon to find an election this close. By all indications, we could be at this for many, many hours here tonight. NBC News is coming on the air right now, and we are projecting that when all the votes are counted, the state of Florida will go tonight to the vice president. Mr. Gore will take the state of Florida.
I don't believe that some of these states that they've called, like Florida, I just don't believe we got enough evidence to be able to call the state. We're actually counting the votes, and as I told you, in some of these counties where we had vote total projections, we're doing better than we thought, and but I feel fine.
We now have a story on our hands. NBC News is changing its projection of the state of Florida, effective immediately from Al Gore to officially too close to call. Let's look at the national electoral map. Again, that swath of red, all the states for Bush, but the disparity, of course, the big anchor states on either end of the country, New York, California, long ago in the Gore column. The important state, of course, at this hour and all night long is the state of Florida. NBC News is declaring right now at 2:17 a.m. and 22 seconds that when the votes are counted, barring any recount or any anomalies, George W. Bush, the governor of Texas, is projected now to win the presidency of the United States in what has been a stunning night in electoral politics in this nation's history. We've got to run out to Austin, Texas. Correspondent Campbell Brown, who's covered this campaign from the beginning. Campbell, this is the end.
You're right, Brian, and a few thousand people have made it to the end. We had a torrential downpour a couple of hours ago, and most of the crowd left, but there are a couple of thousand people still here. We have been told that Governor Bush is coming here from the mansion, which is about a block away. We've been told about 10 minutes from now.
All I can tell you, Brian, is the reaction from the crowd here when it was announced on the big screen on one of the networks. I don't even remember which one they had up there at the moment, but the crowd, you could hear shouts of no, 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 and then there was silence for a little while, and then people started walking away very dejectedly. We still have some people there. I think they're hoping for some kind of miracle to turn this thing around.
Brian, we just talked to one of the aides who is at the mansion right now, and he says indeed Vice President Gore did call President-elect Bush to take back his concession, saying that the vote count in Florida is just too close right now.
All right. NBC News, as of right now, is calling Florida officially too close to call because Florida is subject by law to an automatic recall.
Vice President Gore and Senator Lieberman are fully prepared to concede and to support Governor Bush if and when he is officially elected president. But this race is simply too close to call. And until the recount is concluded and the results in Florida become official, our campaign continues.
We hope and believe we have elected the next president of the United States. The latest vote count in the state of Florida shows Governor Bush winning that state by more than 1,200 votes. They're still counting, and I'm confident when it's all said and done, we will prevail.
Good morning. We do not have a winner.
And that's because the presidential election is still up in the air today, Wednesday, November 8th, 2000.
Hope everybody got a proper amount of sleep last night. Good morning to everybody. Thank you for coming. This morning brings news from Florida. that the final vote count there shows that Secretary Cheney and I have carried the state of Florida. And if that result is confirmed in an automatic recount, as we expect it will be, that we have won the election.
I voted for Buchanan by accident. When I got out of the the poll booth, my husband was there, and I was really excited, and I said, I punched number 2. And he said, Carolyn, that was for Buchanan. And I said, but why? I said it would make sense that Gore would have been listed as second on the ballot, and yet he wasn't.
And turning out that those Buchanan votes could actually turn this whole election for the whole country, this is serious.
No American will ever be able to seriously say again, my vote doesn't count. The American people have now spoken, but it's going to take a little while to determine exactly what they said. The process for that is in motion, and the rest of us will have to let it play out. I want to congratulate Vice President Gore and Governor Bush on a vigorous, hard-fought, truly remarkable campaign.
To ensure that there is not the slightest appearance of a conflict of interest, I have chosen to recuse myself from serving on the Elections Canvassing Commission. Under Florida law, this commission is the ultimate certifier of election results.
Joe Lieberman and I want to thank the nearly 50 million Americans who gave us their votes and confidence. And I want to express my deep and profound gratitude to all of those who cast their ballots, however they cast them. We now need to resolve this election in a way that is fair, forthright, and fully consistent with our Constitution and our laws.
In the latest popular vote count, Al Gore continues to lead George W. Bush by a couple of 100,000 votes, but the electoral vote tally is at a standstill, with Gore at 260 votes, Bush at 246 votes. Neither man has the 270 votes necessary to claim the White House. So it all comes down to the state of Florida.
Now, how is it, the natural question, of course, how is it that so many television networks manage to get the story so wrong? Correspondent Andrea Mitchell will have answers to that question on a special broadcast we're doing tonight at 11 o'clock Eastern Time on MSNBC. More of this broadcast when we come right back. We're back. A lot of history was made last night. For example, the state of New York is sending their first ever female senator to Washington. Oh, and there's this. She just happens to be the First Lady of the United States. Lester Holt has more on the changes ahead for the U.S. Senate. Lester.
Well, the story is not finished. This book is not closed. But let me show you what the current balance of power looks like in the U.S. Senate. When you look down both sides.
Mr. Dallek, your thoughts after watching this all unfold these last 24 hours?
Well, egads, I've never seen anything like this before. But, you know, Brian, what I think about is what a historian's going to say about this election 30 or 40 years down the road. And I think they're going to see it as a kind of a punctuation mark on the end of the imperial presidency. You know, there's been a long arc of decline, of a kind of cynicism toward the presidency, the Kennedy assassination, Johnson in Vietnam, Nixon in Watergate, the 1975 revelations of the Church Committee about secret government operations, assassination plots, Iran-Contra, the end of the Cold War, the Clinton impeachment. They're really quite amazing. Bill Clinton, the only elected president in the country's history to have ever been impeached. And I think this sort of tops this off. Here here are two candidates, neither of whom could, I think, all that effectively capture the public imagination. And also, people are turned off by politics. The Vanishing Voter Project at Harvard tells us that something like 60% of the American public says that American politics they see as pretty disgusting. So I think people are alienated from politics and from the presidency, and I think that's reflected in this current election.
So to turn your argument on its side a bit, is this kind of a validation of the American view of the weak presidency theory?
Yes, I think it is, but only for the time being. I don't think this is a permanent eclipse. I think some kind of crisis comes along, either domestic or more likely foreign. The presidency will be restored to its center place, to its authority. And we've had a kind of imperial presidency during the Cold War. It's over now for the time being, but I think we will see the presidency resurgent again sometime in, who knows, the next 10, 12, 20 years.
Could a national event or crisis do both of the following? Number one, take a leader previously viewed as mediocre and foist him or her into a position of greatness, or second, send the American people out via election in search of greatness?
Yeah, I think either scenario is possible, Brian. When Franklin Roosevelt ran in 1932, Walter Lippmann, the journalist, said, "A nice young man who simply wants to be president." Nobody anticipated that he was going to be as great a president as he turned out to be. And then, of course, one could imagine a crisis and the public goes in search of a heroic figure. And I can well imagine that it could be a woman this time around, because I think the public might want someone who could restore the moral authority of the presidency. And I think it's more likely to be a woman this time than a man.
As interesting a point as that is, we still have to talk about this event. And our last question, Al Gore, the American people, again, provided this is going to be a Bush victory here for the sake of this conversation.
Yes.
American people hate to see a sore loser. What must dictate his behavior now, Mr. Gore?
Well, I think, you know, there are always political considerations. After all, he's going to end up with close to 250,000 popular vote margin in his favor. And if he wants to run again in 2004, I think he accepts the defeat gracefully and stands on the ground that he won the popular vote, and it gives him a strong claim on the nomination next time around.
Historian and author Robert Dallek, always a pleasure having you on. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, how some of the morning papers, even around the world, are covering this American election.
If he's talking about it, we don't know who.
On the satellite loop, we have three big systems affecting the weather. We've got one storm in the northwest.
Good evening, I'm Chris Matthews. It's the day after the election, as you all know, and this race is still too close to call. In the popular vote count, Al Gore does lead George W. Bush by a couple of 100,000 votes, but the electoral vote tally is at a standstill, with Gore at 260 electoral votes, Bush at 246 votes. Neither man has the 270 votes to claim the White House. So it will come down to Florida, whose 25 electoral votes will push one man or the other man over the top. Bush appeared to have won Florida by just under 2,000 votes, but that slim margin has triggered an automatic recount, which is currently underway. So far, Al Gore has picked up over 800 votes in that recount, and George W. Bush has grabbed 176. You can figure out the math for the difference. We begin with an update on the two candidates. Here's NBC's Claire Shipman with the Gore campaign. Chip Reed.
Hi, Chris.
Chip Reed, how are you, Chip?
I am just fine. We are here at Lowe's Hotel. You can see not much happening here now, but earlier today, this was the one place where we got to see Al Gore today or last night. During all the chaos and commotion of last night and this morning, we never did get to see him. You know, he was supposed to show up and give that concession speech and was in his limousine and then in the holding room over at the Legislative Plaza, but we never saw him. And then he came back here and spent all morning and afternoon up in his suite. We are told he finally caught up on some sleep, and then he came down here and gave a statement this afternoon, and it was a statement that was short and sweet but made clear that this investigation is not going to be quick and sweet. Let's listen.
What is at issue here is the fundamental fairness of the process as a whole. Because of what is at stake, this matter must be resolved expeditiously, but deliberately and without any rush to judgment. Despite the fact that Joe Lieberman and I won the popular vote, under our Constitution, it is the winner of the Electoral College who will be the next president. Our Constitution is the whole foundation of our freedom, and it must be followed faithfully.
Now, Chris, there were a lot of words in that, but the ones that jumped out at all of us in this room were no rush to judgment. And that kind of answered the question that everybody here was asking. Were they just going to do a couple of day investigation, allow the recount to proceed, or are they really going to pursue this aggressively? And clearly they're going to pursue this aggressively. They have Warren Christopher heading the team. That's to give it stature and dignity so that at least on the outside it doesn't look like it's being totally politicized. But they are sending a team of dozens of lawyers and investigators into Florida to turn over every stone and look for votes. And they're hoping that it's not just a matter of doing a recount and getting a vote here, a vote there, a vote here, a vote there. They're hoping to come up with a whole chunk of votes somewhere that weren't counted or were improperly counted and that dramatically changes the ultimate vote count here.
A couple
I think
of
it's
points,
a lot of
Chip.
wishful thinking.
A couple of points, Chip. It seems to me, have you talked to, you've obviously been talking to the Gore people. Has anyone discussed with them the oddness of their candidate and perhaps second runner here, the man who came in second, perhaps the man who ends up coming in first, being so hidden from us all these hours when the American people are so focused on this late contest that he just hasn't made himself available even to come out and chat with people?
Yeah, but I don't think anybody was really surprised by that. I mean, George Bush is the one who's sitting in the catbird seat right now, so it probably makes sense for him to be out there. Al Gore is the one trying to figure out, what do I do? There's not really anything for George Bush to do. He's not asking for a recount. There's a lot of strategizing, a lot of discussing behind the scenes going on here on how to approach this. And early in the day, it looked like they weren't going to hit it very aggressively. There were some senior aides who had said to me, you know, we're not very optimistic about this. Recounts seldom turn things around. But by the end of the day, as they started hearing all these allegations of irregularities and errors and confusion at the polling booth flowing in from Florida, they started to think, hey, maybe there really is something to this. And that's when they decided to really send in a team of people to aggressively go after this. But Gore behind closed doors, I don't think anybody was really surprised. We really expected one statement just to give an idea of where he's going with this, and now we know.
Well, let's talk about where he's going with it. What's your sense? Give me a picture, if you can, of what you expect to be the action between, well, let's say this time of night, tomorrow night, when the counting is done in this first recount. Do you expect that they're going to be moving ahead with a demand, perhaps litigation or some other injunction, perhaps a legal injunction to try to stop this from being declared formally a victory for George W. Bush in Florida?
Hard to predict. It certainly is a distinct possibility. They keep making clear to us that Warren Christopher is the kind of guy who does things in a very deliberative fashion. He's not going to be somebody who's going to feel the need to rush into this right away. I don't think they feel the need to try to nip this in the bud tomorrow. I think they feel that they have days or even weeks at their disposal to work on this, and they're going to wait and see if they really do need to engage in any major litigation here, and they're going to pick their targets very carefully. I don't think they want to just go in and challenge everything because it's going to make them look desperate and like they're just totally politicizing the process. They want to find the real weaknesses in the election that occurred and focus on those and try to overturn it there rather than just going in with a big broad-based attack that would be perceived as the American public as a desperation last gasp effort.
Okay, very much. Thank you very much. Chip Reed with the Gore campaign in Nashville. Joining us right now from Bush headquarters in Austin, Texas, is NBC's Campbell Brown. Campbell, you look so familiar there. You in front of that Capitol have become an iconic figure in the United States. Let me ask you about the feeling there. Is it the opposite? Do you have a somewhat upbeat still candidate there because the numbers are still over 1,000 votes in his favor in Florida?
Yes, absolutely. And Chip is right. There's not a whole lot going on here because there's not much for them to do right now. It is quiet at Bush headquarters. Staff started filing out of the headquarters a couple of hours ago, calling it a night essentially. There's just not much for them to do right now except wait. They described the mood there as cautiously optimistic, a subdued confidence coming out of there as they expect that tomorrow, when this recount is complete, what they're hoping for is 5 p.m. Eastern time, that it will validate a Bush win. Now, the governor himself came out and talked to reporters this morning and gave that same impression. He also announced that former Secretary of State James Baker will lead a team of attorneys down to Florida to monitor the recount. And this is important because they'll also be preparing in the event that there is a court challenge. And one advisor did say tonight that they have to be prepared for that they have to be prepared for the fact this may not be over tomorrow and be geared up for it. So that's tempering the optimism somewhat. After his news conference, Governor Bush sat down and had lunch with Dick Cheney and their wives, talked to reporters a little bit about what an extraordinary night last night was, and talked a little bit about where things now stand.
I feel like a man who worked my heart out, put out a positive message, and a person who is looking forward to a quick resolution of the ballots in the state of Florida.
What were the emotional swings like last night, Governor? It must have been crazy.
Well, it was a great night. It was an interesting night. Needless to say, there was some consternation with Florida's governor during our family dinner when somebody jumped the proverbial gun, as we say. And so he is the person that really went through some, obviously some interesting emotions. I was confident that when it was all said and done, that Florida would be taken off the declared, state role, and that cooler heads would prevail and the count would actually matter. That's what's happened.
What did you tell the Vice President when he called the second time?
I just, I thought it was an interesting comment he made, and listened to what he had to say, and didn't have much to say.
Were you amazed that it took place that way?
Well, I was. I felt like I was fully prepared to go out and give a speech, and thanking my supporters, and he withdrew his earlier comments, and here we sit.
Now, Chris, while they are in wait-and-see mode, the high-level staffers, Bush's top advisors, are beginning to gear up for transition, a sign of their confidence, obviously. And sources are telling NBC News that Dick Cheney will head the transition and that the names being talked about, and this won't come as any surprise, Secretary of State Colin Powell, National Security Advisor Dr. Condoleezza Rice, and former Transportation Secretary Andrew Card, topping the list for White House Chief of Staff.
Well, maybe
Chris?
you ought to make General Powell head of ballot security at this point. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us right now, Campbell Brown. We go now to NBC's Suzanne Mulveau, who's got the latest from Ground Zero right down in Florida. Suzanne, what's happening right now? It's interesting the language used by the two candidates. Al Gore says he doesn't want to rush to judgment. Governor Bush says he wants a quick resolution. Who's going to win?
Well, down here, a lot of voters are still not just getting over the election. They're very upset right now. We talked to several dozen of protesters who are out here at the governmental center, and they really don't care what either one of the candidates are saying. They feel that they've been cheated by the system, that their choice is not really reflected in what has happened down here. Of course, they are upset. They feel that a lot of people have unintentionally voted for Pat Buchanan, who got 3,400 votes here, as opposed to Gore and Lieberman because of this unique design in the ballot. What we're waiting for now, however, is the final recount for this particular county, and it is important because of what is reflected with the Pat Buchanan vote, but also there are 450,000 votes here, of which Governor Bush garnered 33% and Gore 58%. The real question is, what are those numbers going to be for people who decided, okay, I vote once here, I vote second here for the same title, for the same position. Those votes were thrown out. It'll be interesting to see those numbers because it might reflect some of the confusion over the ballot. And as you had mentioned before, those numbers are changing, with 28 of Florida's 67 districts already reporting their final recount numbers, with Bush gaining 176 and Gore gaining 839. You have to ask what's going on here. Election officials say, well, a lot of these ballot cards weren't punched all the way through. That will account for some of these additional voters. Whether or not it actually changes the percentages is another matter. We are waiting for that final recount. We've been here, they've been promising for the last couple of hours. You can see behind me it's set up. You've got the members of the Florida's Sheriff's Department as well as police officers. And behind that glass is where it was all taking place, where you had observers both from the Democratic and Republican parties overseeing the process, and as well as many people at work just making sure that this is done the best way that it can be done. And also want to mention one last thing is, while the Gore campaign is looking and contacted, by the way, one of the most powerful law firms in Florida to explore what their legal options are, there is a group of voters already who have decided to file a lawsuit against the Palm Beach County Canvassing Board, and I'm declaring that the ballot is deceptive, confusing, and misleading. So, Chris, the controversy is certainly not dying this election day, turning to election
Thanks for
week.
that update, Suzanne Mulveau, who's down in Dade County. Anyway, to talk about the Florida recount and its incredible election, the whole incredible election, we're joined now by our panel, Republican strategist Ed Rollins, MSNBC senior political analyst Lawrence O'Donnell, Voter.com's Amy Holmes, in Philadelphia, Democratic Congressman Chaka Fattah, and in Washington, former Bush Chief of Staff and former New Hampshire Governor John Sununu. First, we're joined by phone by the great presidential historian and author Stephen Ambrose. Mr. Ambrose, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
You've written so many years about Eisenhower and about President Nixon and about great American pioneers and heroes and the men of World War II. Tonight, it seems to be an opportunity for these two men, relatively young men, Bush and Gore, to show their stuff. How do you think they're doing?
I'm not happy. I wish that we had a winner, but we don't. And I'm distressed that there's talk about challenging in Florida, not just on the recount, but on the ballot itself and so on. And I would like to just remind you and others that in 1960, Dick Nixon was told by President Eisenhower, we really ought to have an investigation of this election. We can't have them steal it. And that, that applied especially to Cook County, where it was going to take more than a year to do a recount, and to Texas, where there was no provision for recounting. But to get to the point, Nixon said this: I could think of no worse example for nations abroad who are trying to become democracies than that of the United States wrangling over the results of our presidential election. And I think that applies just as much today as it did in 1960. And they're going to do the recount, and apparently by 5 o'clock tomorrow, they're going to tell us who won Florida. And at that point, whoever the loser might be, whether it's Gore or Bush, then you make a nice speech saying, I accept the results of the election. And that is what I most want to see happen.
Unfortunately,
this business of the Electoral College and the popular vote, it disturbs me quite a lot that the American people, I'm told, are going to be demanding that we get rid of the Electoral College and that we just have a popular vote all across the country. But we live in a federal republic, and the states do matter. And the Rocky Mountain states, for example, 14 of them, between them, don't have the population of New York City, but they've got 28 votes in the United States Senate versus 2 for the whole of the state of New York, and so on. And this is the rules under which these guys went into the election with. We're going to decide this by the Electoral College. And this business of, well, look, and what if Gore has the most popular votes and Bush is second there, but he's got the most electoral votes, then we ought to get it away? I don't believe that at all.
Well, what did you make of?
Stick with the Constitution that we've got.
What did you make of Al Gore, the vice president, using the following language today in his statement? He said, despite the fact that Joe Lieberman and I won the popular vote. Under the Constitution, it's the winner of the Electoral College who will be the next president. It sounds like he wants to remind us and emphasize the fact that he really won. He said, despite the fact. What do you make of that language?
I agree with what you just said entirely, and I wish that he hadn't used such words. And this is not the first time that such a thing has happened. We've had quite a few minority presidents.
I know.
We had Hayes, Tillman, and all the rest. Everybody's been talking about.
I know.
And I want to tell you this. Now, in 1960...
I have to go, Mr. Ambrose.
The Republic is going to survive.
Okay, thank you. On that note, Stephen Ambrose, author and historian, thank you for joining us. We'll be back with our special in just a moment.
In 4th grade, our kids score better in math and science than most of them.
Be able to seriously say again, my vote doesn't count. The American people have now spoken, but it's going to take a little while to determine exactly what they said.
We're back with Ed Rollins, Lawrence O'Donnell, Amy Holmes, Congressman Chaka Fattah from Philadelphia, and former governor and former White House Chief of Staff John Sununu. We want to start on this question, picking up on what the great historian Stephen Ambrose said in a few moments ago. It's the whole question of leadership, what is expected of great men. They are both men. Let's make it clear. What we expect from them is greatness. Ed Rollins, how does George W. Bush display his greatness? How does Al Gore in the next several days and hours?
Well, graciousness is almost as important as greatness in the next couple days. I think the bottom line is by 5 o'clock tomorrow, that board will certify what this vote was about. You can challenge it after the fact, and there's going to be a winner. And if it's George W. Bush, I'm sure he's going to be a gracious winner, and Al Gore will be a gracious loser. If not, and you want to throw this into a legal process, then I think clearly, without a lot of evidence being put before the American public in the very near future, you're going to have a very chaotic and a very bitter taste in a lot of people's mouth at the end of a very long and rather tasteless election.
There's 3 reasons to pursue in a sort of litigation or argument. One is just to raise hell. We don't think Gore's going to do that. One is the chance that maybe there was a miscount, maybe somewhere, and just try. What the heck? When I try, there might be some mistake somewhere on the ballot somewhere. The other is to really know there's something wrong. Chris Lehane earlier tonight on this network was speaking with authority like he knew there was something wrong because, hey, he lost Florida. He must be something wrong. He lost Florida. My God, he lost Florida. If there's just a chance there was a mistake somewhere, and just a chance you get another bite at the apple, is that worth Al Gore pursuing this?
Well, I find myself agreeing with Senator Torricelli that we're going to do the canvass. We know it's a canvass and not a recount tomorrow night, and whoever wins, wins. And what we're seeing now with these new exciting numbers, again, politics is such a roller coaster, that it might be George Bush who's saying, hey, let's wait for those overseas ballots from the military that could be supporting me. So both candidates have a big decision tomorrow.
In other words, to bolster his numbers. Lawrence.
Chris, Brian Williams interviewed George Mitchell earlier tonight, former Senate Majority Leader and a former federal judge. And when asked about this situation, George Mitchell was not at all timid about the possibility of litigation, about the possibility of looking at this legally, as you might expect a federal judge to be willing to do.
He's also one of the most difficult men in the history of the United States.
Well, he's partisan also. He is also, by the way, as Colin Powell is at the top of the list for Secretary of State in the Republican administration, George Mitchell would probably be the Secretary of State in a Democratic administration. But this place, Florida, is not at all unaccustomed to chaos at the ballot box.
Right.
The last great voter fraud case in America was in Miami. The Miami Herald won a Pulitzer Prize for its series on it, where the mayoral election of 1997 was overturned by a trial judge because of massive voter fraud on absentee ballots. The trial judge vacated the election, ordered a new election. The appeals court said, no, there's not enough cause here to order a new election. We're just going to throw away all those ballots. And the appeals court then installed the mayor.
Correa.
Now, what's interesting about this is it raises that case. I'm going to read you an excerpt from the appeals court where it says that what happened in this case, which was voter fraud, was not enough to vacate an election and to call for a new election. So anyone who has hopes for any kind of new election, county-wide, statewide, that seems absolutely hopeless in the Florida case. Based on the precedent, the appeals court in Florida could find no precedent for having a new election. But throwing out votes, invalidating huge chunks of votes in Miami elections, that's not news down there.
Let's go to Chaka Fattah in Philadelphia, a city that's no stranger to problems in this area of elections. I know you're grimacing, Congressman, but it's been known to happen in Philadelphia. We've had problems like this, disputes over elections. What do you make of this choice by Gore to put 50 lawyers into Florida, led by Warren Christopher?
Well, I think the number is actually 73, but I want to go back to earlier, maybe misunderstanding of the Vice President's words today. The most important thing he said today was not, we don't want to rush to judgment. The most important thing he said is that the Constitution shall be followed faithfully, and that notwithstanding the fact that he got the most popular votes, the president will be elected by the Electoral College. And I don't want your viewers to miss the point that Vice President Gore has said squarely that whoever wins the electoral vote, he said that today, and for some reason the focus has been on some other part of his remarks. But we believe that he won not just the majority of votes in the country, but the majority of the votes in the state of Florida. And that.
What evidence do you have, Congressman, for that?
Well, first of all, if you just look at the statistical difference today, based on the recount, if he has a similar day tomorrow, we will be talking about a race separated by just a few votes. So let's just look at the reality of what's going on. Your own network has, on its own, outlined today on the evening news a series of irregularities taking place in other counties, not just in the Palm Beach County. But the most important thing first is to walk through the math. Let's go through, as they've done today, and Al Gore has picked up some 800 votes. That's only through 28 counties. Let's get to the larger counties, and let's make sure every vote is counted. And we believe that it's not just a question of making up some 1,700 votes, but that there are thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of votes that were intended for Vice President Gore. And we want to make sure that every person, because that's something that people have given their lives for, not just on foreign battlefields, but in the civil rights struggle, that every person's vote is counted.
All right, let's go to Governor Sununu. What do you make of this situation, Governor, politically and constitutionally? Governor Sununu.
Yes, I'm sorry. Say it again, please.
Well, the question we have here is whether Al Gore is pursuing this course in an appropriate manner by insisting, by bringing all these attorneys into that state of Florida. Is he right to prepare himself for a major litigation down there?
Well, I'm inspired by the fact that Al Gore is going to live by the Constitution of the United States. That's very inspiring to hear. But the fact, Stephen Ambrose is right. There is a measure of character on how this is handled. And this suggestion, everybody running around trying to undermine confidence by making allegations on the random chance that there may be some validity out there, I think is unbelievable.
How do you explain the fact that almost 700 votes, net 700 votes, have been reversed and have gone to Gore since the recount began this morning?
You know, I've gone through lots and lots of recounts in my life. There are lots of changes that go like that. They ebb and flow back and forth. We in New Hampshire had the closest senatorial election in history, the Wyman-Durkin election, which, as you know, got sent back to the state. Right. But that's a process that's there. But to be talking about a problem on the Buchanan votes, for example, in a county just because he got 3,000 votes, he got almost 3,000 votes last time around in that county. So with all due respect, raising that kind of uncertainty in a process on which there is no tangible evidence of a problem is ridiculous. You can find 3 citizens to complain about any ballot structure anywhere in the country at any time. They found 3, they filed a suit. They should not be doing that until this count is over, and to be running around the way they are is exactly the opposite of the statesmanlike character that Nixon showed in '60.
Let's go to
Lawrence. On statesmanlike character, Governor Sununu, this is Lawrence O'Donnell. I assume you would recommend to Governor Bush that if he loses the recount, he should immediately concede and not consider in any way studying any of the questionable ballots in this election.
I think if the only other thing that I would recommend doing is so that everybody's vote gets counted is to make sure that every vote is counted, including the ones that are coming in for the servicemen. But beyond that, unless they have specific evidence of an irregularity, I would not go through the process of peering into each punched hole in each and every ballot.
Governor Sununu, we're going to get back in a minute with our fellow panelists. We're going to hit the question, what kind of a rickety system do we have that doesn't bear close inspection? Is this system we have for picking presidents only good when there's wide margins, or can it handle very close elections like the one we have now? We'll be back to talk about that open question in just a moment.
Is your internet slowing you down? Get Velocity High Velocity Internet and push the play button on life.
see nothing yet.
We're here on what was meant to be the night after, but remains the continuing day of this election to talk about this incredible decision by the American people, which has left election counters, vote counters, with roughly a 50-50 split among the two major parties across the country, but especially in Florida, where the vote counting, recounting will continue tomorrow for the second day, and it's making this an even closer race. It was about 1,700 votes that separated the two candidates yesterday. In the regular balloting, 663 of that differences has now been taken off, reducing it almost about 1,000 votes between the two gentlemen right now as we speak. I want to talk about that continually tonight with Ed Rollins, who ran the Ronald Reagan re-election campaign, Lawrence O'Donnell of MSNBC, Amy Holmes of Voter.com, U.S. Congressman from Pennsylvania, Chaka Fattah, former Governor John Sununu, former Chief of Staff as well, to President Bush. First, let's get joined right now by NBC's Nora O'Donnell. Nora, you've been in touch with the Gore folk. Talk about what their strategy seems to be.
Well, tonight, the sense coming from the Gore campaign is that this is not going to be over tomorrow at 5 o'clock once this recount is in. Why? Because they have sent more than 50 staffers from Nashville headquarters to places like Palm Beach in order to set up shop in Florida to be there to contest this type of election. There's no word from Gore officials yet about whether, in fact, they will file something in state court to contest this election. However, we have learned that, in fact, that they have contacted a prominent law firm in the state. Here's another interesting development. I just got a phone call from some of my friends at Roll Call newspaper, which I used to write for. They're telling me that they're reporting on the front page of their paper tomorrow that lobbyists on K Street were getting calls today from Gore surrogates saying, we need to raise $3 million in the next 48 hours in order to finance this effort. They are sending a lot of people down to Florida, and they're asking people on K Street, the lobbyists, to raise money. They're setting up a different type of account in order to do that.
This is so true to American politics the year 2000, Ed Rollins. Here we go again, another excuse for the pigs to get into the trough, for the lobbyists to get their influence. They can peddle now. They can make the new president of the United States, if it's Gore, owe them even more than he owes them already, because they're the ones that paid for his recount that perhaps put him in the White House. Right. Isn't this what this whole fight about campaign finance was about?
It certainly is. And I think, I mean, first of all, it does cost a lot of money to roll 50 lawyers down there. It's unfortunate you couldn't find 50 lawyers in the country and want to volunteer a day or two to see where the process goes on both sides.
Of course, that wouldn't be true to the way we do things either.
No. But I think the reality is, if someone has to pull the trigger for this war, if the war is going to start, and I think that's got to be the vice president. It's his reputation that's going to be damaged if he goes into this and he loses. It's not going to be Warren Christopher's going to go back to California. It's not going to be any of the fundraisers. It's going to be his. He's got to make that judgment tomorrow night. And I don't think if there's sufficient evidence that he can't win this thing or he can't change the outcome, he's not going to go there.
But of course, there will be enough evidence to launch some kind of.
Where do you start? Well, give me an opening.
You could start with the oddity of that ballot down there. You could start with anything. Remember,
sure,
if Gore is the legal challenger here, you have to remember he's the winner of the popular vote in the United States of America. Most voters are going to cheer him on for a couple of days anyway before they get tired.
Congressman Fattah, jump in.
Let me just say this. Your network affiliate in Philadelphia, as a weatherman who used to live in Palm Beach, moved 5 years ago. He got an absentee ballot in the mail at his Philadelphia address to vote in this election, even though he's a registered voter in Pennsylvania. There's going to be a lot of questions across the board. Excuse me. What I want to make sure you understand is that Al Gore and his campaign, they have a responsibility to the almost 50 million people who voted for him. You're going to disenfranchise the people in my district who voted for Al Gore if he does not stand up and make sure that there's a fair count in a state that we believe and he believes, and every indication is that he may have won the majority of the votes. He can't just equivocate on that point. We'll see as the count goes through. We've already picked up almost 700 votes. We got 1,000 votes separating by 6 million voters. And for any of us as professionals in this business, I know Ed Rollins, if he was on the other side of this, there would be a serious look at this.
If there is no hard evidence, Congressman, tomorrow night of any voting corruption of any kind, that it's simply a question of maybe a poorly written ballot, no evidence of any lost ballots or anything else, you would pursue this fight how long?
I think that you have to be responsible, and I think that unlike Governor Bush, who said he's confident he's going to win tomorrow, and his brother, Jeb Bush, saying that he's confident he's going to win. I don't know why we're doing a recount if the fix is already in. Let's just count the numbers. Let's count the numbers, and let's see. No, I'm not saying he's fixed it. What I'm saying is both of them said today that they're confident that they already have won.
That's why
let us walk through this and see what happens.
Chris, you know, this is not the only close state. Wisconsin was about 4,000 votes. Iowa was about 6,000 votes. New Mexico was another handful of thousands votes. You can start this process and roll it all across the country and completely undermine the credibility of the American electoral process.
I got a lot of respect for John. All I will say is this, is that when we had a little sexual liaison in the White House, people didn't have a problem with a constitutional crisis. Now we're talking about protecting people's right to vote and making sure that their votes count, and we want to say, well, no, we should just walk away and not even make sure that the math adds up.
Well, count the votes, but don't start a process where you're hoping to find a random flaw in the
agree with
system.
you.
I've seen, you've been in the electoral game long enough to know that there is no perfection in it. I'm not talking about the deliberate kind of problems that were referred to in the Miami mayoral election. I'm talking about statistically, there's a bent ballot here, there's a twisted ballot there, and an unpunched ballot there. And,
I agree with you.
And an artful problem.
Amy.
And I'm glad the Congressman brought up the question of impeachment, because one of Al Gore's real dangers here is the whiff of impeachment that we have. We have low voter turnout, 50%. We have voter apathy here, and that could go either way. And we have the challenger, Al Gore, or the incumbent, saying that he could win this on a technicality with the
let me be argumentative.
We have the winner of the popular vote and the electoral vote. We believe by winning the state of Florida.
Let me join you in that argument, Congressman Fattah. If I won the popular vote for President of the United States, I would feel a certain moral armament against my critics, and I might say, damn it, I don't care what you guys think. I'm going on a fishing expedition. I'm going to go through every ballot in Florida, and I'm going to find, if I can find 2,000 votes to overturn that original count, I'm going to do it. You know why? Because I get the most votes in the country, and I don't care what you think. I'm going on a fishing expedition, and I don't have to have any evidence up front. What do you think of that?
Well, Chris, first of all, I'm shuddering at the thought of you winning the popular vote for President of the United States. But look, you'd certainly have a right to do it for a couple of weeks. I mean, the Electoral College doesn't meet until December 18th. I don't think...
Go out and fish.
Yeah,
to go on a fishing expedition for a couple of weeks? That's exactly what's wrong.
What is the difference between that and the so-called get out the vote movement? You know, you've got these vans trying to drag people to the polls on that last day. What's the difference between that and trying to get your vote out of the votes that have already been cast and miscounted?
You know, it's the Gore campaign position that we believe that he won the majority of the votes cast in Florida.
Why do you believe
yesterday.
that? Why do you believe that?
We have every indication, and we want to make sure
you
we're
have
going
no
through.
indication.
No,
you have zero.
You know, that sounds like a Mooney religious belief. I've heard that all day. You people
Chris.
say you believe something before there was any counting today. How can you believe, Congressman, before there were any ballots recounted today, that Gore won the election?
I don't know why you find it so easy to believe Governor Bush that he's going to win tomorrow.
He won the
You
first
can't
count.
understand that we believe that not only did we carry the majority of the votes in the country, that we may have also carried the majority of votes in Florida.
That is the talking points of the Gore campaign. It is based on no evidence.
I'm glad that we have someone here who can speak for the Gore campaign. Well, y'all could chat among yourselves. But
the fact is, you don't have any evidence, do you, Congressman? Just give me your evidence.
No, I do have evidence.
All right, what is it?
We have a circumstance in which 6 million votes have been cast, and at this moment, by less than 1,000 votes, and they're changing each time you check the math to Gore's benefit.
Okay,
to Gore's benefit.
Okay, I agree. Okay, that's a different statement. I've been hearing from the Gore people that they believe they won even before there was a recount because they want to believe they've won. Governor Sununu.
It doesn't take much to create uncertainty. Let me give you one statistic I popped off the net yesterday. In the middle of the night while all this was going on, I was looking at returns. In the city of Detroit,
go ahead, Governor.
Al Gore won 260 some odd thousand to about 16,000. I have never in my life seen a return ratio like that. Even if you trained everybody to vote that way, I got to tell you, it's hard to do.
Okay. We'll be back with Ed Rollins and the others when we get back. Keep with us here on Hardball.
The Power Source is brought to you by Avaya, communication without boundaries. While grocery shopping isn't always the most exciting thing to do, some new inventions such as the self-checkout system hope to make the experience a little easier. With the use of touchscreen displays at the checkout counter, shoppers are guided through the transaction, scanning their own items and then paying for the groceries with either credit or debit cards.
We now need to resolve this election in a way that is fair, forthright, and fully consistent with our Constitution and our laws. What is at issue here is the fundamental fairness of the process as a whole. Because of what is at stake, this matter must be resolved expeditiously, but deliberately and without any rush to judgment.
Those were the words, Ed Rollins. No rush to judgment. It sounds like he's willing to litigate whatever it takes.
Well, I think for a variety of reasons that have been discussed tonight, this was a guy who last night was ready to concede. I think today he probably has got revved up by his troops that you really can win this thing. You've put 2 years of your life into it. It's nice to have the Stephen Ambrose speeches about statesmanship and what have you. I'm not sure if Richard Nixon had it to do over again in 1960, he wouldn't have gone full bore, considering where his life ended up. So, you know, the bottom line, I think, though, is by tomorrow, either we're going to have a legitimate vote that gets approved by the board and we declare a winner, or we're going to have a long, tedious process that's going to damage the political process even more than it is already today.
Would it be good for the country if we had a vote that showed that Al Gore did win Florida and it matched up with so the electoral vote winner here, Al Gore, would match up with the popular vote winner, Al Gore?
Listen, if Al Gore, and I say this as a Republican who was very pleased last night with Bush's victory, if Al Gore ends up winning by 2,000 votes tomorrow after a legitimate count, and he's the, you know, we salute him and we move on.
It's a hell of a lot simpler, isn't it? Yes.
Chris, the Republican Secretary of State in the state of Florida has said there's going to be no certification tomorrow, that it's going to be at least 9 days or 10 days because the overseas ballots have to be counted. And let me say something about them. We've heard people say all day and on this show that these are military ballots. Let's be clear, they're overseas ballots. Some are from military people, but close to half of them went to Bill Clinton in 1996. So to suggest that somehow, some way, that even if Gore picks up votes and wins tomorrow, that those particular ballots are going to put Bush back in the lead, I think that we need to just slow down, count each vote. I agree with John Sununu. We should not play any games, and we should not cry foul or be sore losers if we've lost. But we should not, at any point, compromise or equivocate on the fact that if we won a majority of the votes in that state for Al Gore, that he become the winner of the Electoral College, which he leads tonight, and the leader of the popular vote.
Well, the latest count, we're just getting through my ear, that it's about 351 votes that have been reversed from the 1,700 votes difference between Bush and Gore. Gore has picked up about 350 votes. At that rate, he probably won't get, he won't overcome the lead that was established in the first count.
Well, the counties aren't equal. The counties aren't equal in population.
Of course not, but if this vote stayed about 1,000 votes plus, would you let it lay there and say that Bush won, Congressman?
Not if there are 2,000 or 3,000 absentee overseas ballots that are going to come in.
So we should wait till that happens. That should be the final determiner.
I agree that everybody who is voting in Florida under the law should be entitled to have their vote.
Me and John Sununu agree with
we all agree on that. What about the complaint or the call by some of those people in the street down there in Palm Beach County that they want to vote all over again as a county, not as a state, because they didn't like the way, and I can agree with them, the way that ballot was printed. Congressman Fattah.
Well, I think that what we need to do is to first count all of the votes. The biggest problem that may come out is not the people on the street who say that they were misled by that ballot, but there seems to be thousands of ballots in which the Buchanan thing was punched and then the Gore thing was punched, and that the election board would not give additional ballots, and that those ballots were then not counted because they had more than one candidate. There are a lot of questions that need to get answered.
Right. Lawrence, today some woman said to us, Ricky Golden, that one of those people today said that they had made the mistake of voting for Buchanan. They realized the horror of it. They went back in the booth. They went back and got another card, went back and rewrote.
Our voting technology is ridiculous, and we make it too difficult.
Okay, thank you. On that note, Lawrence O'Donnell, we'll be right back with our panel to talk more about this amazing night in American political history.
Magic. Oh, you gotta see it. Slightly unexpected. Perfectly perfected.
Digital palm quarter with 3-way PC link from Panasonic.
Oh, just a bit of magic.
Hi, I'm David Orick. How'd you like to get this $30 car back absolutely free? Call this number now and try my amazingly light, incredibly powerful 8-pound Orick XL. Call 1-888-383-4000.
Well, it's one of those nights that we'll all remember, trying to figure out who our next president's going to be after the balloting is over, but not completely counted accurately, at least not to the satisfaction of both parties. In fact, the people of Florida, we might argue, big night for George W. Bush. He sits in a very strange limbo right now. He may be the next president. The odds may be 55 to 45 he's the next president, but probably not much more. Ed Rollins, how should he behave?
Well, he has to behave very respectful. I mean, this is an impression that the public for the first time is going to get of him the next couple of days as the next president, potentially the next president. So I think, I think there's a couple little snippets that have been a little out of line, and I think he just has to be very careful, has to be very patient, and make sure that Jim Baker and his people are doing the right things.
Governor Sununu, should he launch the kind of counteroffensive you outlined in terms of the other states where the balloting was close? Should he get a sense that the Democrats are bringing in all their weaponry to go in and try to contest Florida?
Well, I think if there's a formal re-evaluation, recounting, re-addition process like in Florida in those states, that might be a good thing to do. But, we're talking about irregularities in Florida. How about the thousands or tens of thousands of Republicans in the Florida Panhandle that's on a different time zone that could have been discouraged from voting by too early a call on Florida by the networks? Are we going to go and say, we'll give you guys a chance to come in and vote? I don't think so. This is part of the process that's there. It's not a perfect process. I think you have to live with it the way it is, and I would recommend that both Governor Bush and Vice President Gore recognize that they get the recount, they get the counting of the overseas votes, and unless there's specific evidence of some malicious malfeasance in the process, that they let it stand at wherever it comes out.
Congressman Fattah, what does George W. Bush have to do to earn the credibility, the legitimacy of being the next president in the next several days to you?
Look, I think for George Bush, this count in Florida is as important as it is for Al Gore, because no one wants to have a circumstance in which their presidency, if he were to win, and we don't believe he's won, but if he were to win, a presidency that lacked the credibility because of some taint on the election. It's important for everyone in this country, given the closeness of the vote, that we get an accurate count out of Florida.
Right. Do you think John Kennedy back in 1960 should have demanded a recount of the Chicago vote?
No, it was Nixon or Kennedy. It wouldn't matter. What we need is we need a fair count. I think that when Governor Jeb Bush today says in his statement, without being questioned, he reminded the people of Florida that voter fraud was a felony. I think it sends the wrong message. Really, it's more important to us to know who truly won.
Right, sure.
Than anybody who did something improper trying to help whoever they thought was in favor in that particular circumstance. Okay. We need to get to the bottom of what the vote count is in Florida.
Okay. And certainly for George Bush, it's doubly important because he's behind in the popular vote. So he needs to have it understood to the public if it's true that he did sew up the electoral vote. If there's still a question on that, he didn't get either the popular vote or the electoral vote, he goes into the White House extremely disadvantaged.
Does he suffer by the fact that his brother's governor, and that will put a taint by itself on this count?
I don't think so. The way Jeb Bush handled it today, and this, you have a Democratic Attorney General in that state who's heavily involved in the Gore campaign, who is still involved in the vote counting process in a way that the governor isn't. I think the Bushes have cleaned themselves of any possible, any suspicion.
Does anyone believe now that they'll get a revote in Palm Beach because of the quality of the ballot?
Absolutely no chance of a revote in Florida.
No. Any chance of revote? Congressman Fatah, do you expect there'll be a revote in Miami and Beach, what's it called, Palm Beach County?
No revote.
I think that if you have a circumstance, for instance, where you have a senior citizens apartment building with 2,000 people in it who voted, and if you could confirm that none of them voted for Buchanan, but he got votes out of that building, I think that you could have some level of redress in that county.
Okay, thank you very much, Congressman Todd. Thank you, everybody. We're coming back with another hour on MSNBC tonight as the recount in Florida goes on. This presidential race is still too close to call, a phrase you'll be hearing for a while now. In a minute, I'll be joined by Brian Williams, Nora O'Donnell, Pat Cadell, and Carl Bernstein as our special coverage of Decision 2000 continues.
Can your business afford downtime due to bad power? Can your enterprise avoid power disruptions? Who ensures availability for more networks worldwide? APC. Power management solutions wherever data is created, transmitted, or stored. For a free downtime analysis, go to iwantapc.com. Two eyes see the same world. No two businesses are identical. And now, one company creates internet solutions unique to you. Fujitsu. The possibilities are infinite.
In the dream, you are moving toward a horizon. And when you arrive there, you find wondrous things. A world filled with elegance and grace. With clean lines and unassuming beauty. Where the dream meets reality is just on the horizon. Horizons by Ethan Allen.
Live your dream today with the simple finance plan. Only at Ethan Allen.
In 4th grade, our kids score better in math and science than most other countries. But by 12th grade, they'll fall behind 80% of the countries in the industrialized world. The longer they stay in our schools, the worse off they are. The problem isn't our kids, or parents, or teachers. It's the system. And our kids are never going to catch up until we open it up and give parents more choices. There is a better way.
Papa, the ref is blind. Hey, penalty. That was no penalty.
MCI lets you call Western Europe for just 9 cents a minute all weekend long, so you can get great low rates at home and abroad. Call 1-800-476-SAVE to sign up now and get 1 hour of free calling to anywhere in the world.
If he's talking about it, we don't know who the next president's going to be at this point. Everyone's talking about it. Imus in the Morning, weekdays 6 to 10 Eastern, only on MSNBC.
The vote counting, meticulous this time, goes on tonight in the state of California. At stake, who will occupy the office of President of the United States? Meantime, tonight, both candidates insist that when the process is over, when it's all over, they will be victorious.
NBC News, this is a Decision 2000 special report. Here is Brian Williams.
Good evening. The race for president in this country has suddenly come to a dead stop. It's been 24 hours since we collectively, the television networks, thought we might have a surprise on our hands, and this election was going to one Al Gore of the state of Tennessee. We have quite a story on our hands again, and it involves nothing less than the selection of the next president of the United States. In many ways, this is now a local news story. It's all on the state of Florida, where they are counting the votes and where the outcome will affect who is named president. These are our talking points tonight, that ballot fight going on in Florida and the possible litigation to come as the Gore camp, for one, sends a party of 50 people down to fight their fight. This story is, make no mistake, the talk of the nation, and we will gauge that and we will get to that as this hour progresses. But first, let's begin with the activity going on in the state of California. NBC News legal correspondent Dan Abrams with us to bring us up to date. Dan?
Well, good evening, Brian. By law, the various parties here were required to count the votes again, meaning that because it was so close in this election, the law says you have to recount the votes. They've begun that process here. 28 of the 67 counties here in Florida have begun that process, have completed that process of recounting. Here are the numbers that we have so far. Gore has added 605 votes in the state of Florida. George Bush has added 254, which is a net gain of 351 votes for Al Gore. Now that is significant, Brian, because what he needs is about 1,800 votes. Based on these numbers we're receiving so far, if all counties are equal, that wouldn't be quite enough for Al Gore, but nevertheless, it is keeping the Democrats optimistic. Now, one of the people who would have been involved in certifying this recounting process would have been Jeb Bush, the brother of George Bush. But he says he has removed himself to avoid any potential conflict.
To ensure that there is not the slightest appearance of a conflict of interest, I have chosen to recuse myself from serving on the Elections Canvassing Commission. Under Florida law, this commission is the ultimate certifier of election results.
Now, the Democrats say that isn't all they're looking at here. They're not just looking at a recount. They are looking at what they are calling irregularities in the voting in the state.
All right, Dan Abrams. Oh.
Florida election, but the presidential election is at stake right now, and we are watching it very closely.
One of the big issues, Brian, has been this question of whether there were certain people in the state of Florida who thought that they were voting for Al Gore when in fact they may have been voting for Pat Buchanan. And as a result, there have already been a number of lawsuits filed by voters saying, I thought that I was voting for Al Gore, but because the ballot was so confusing, I ended up voting for Pat Buchanan. They're requesting a revote in the entire county of Palm Beach. That seems unlikely, although it appears now that the Democrats are considering at this point making a similar request. Brian?
Dan, the hours are taking their toll. Everyone in this is getting punchy. No one's had any sleep, and yet the work you're covering down there is absolutely meticulous. Have you any timetable in Florida on when all of this is going to start to look like it's finishing up?
Well, we're expecting it to be done no later than 5 p.m. tomorrow. Now, the election division saying 7 p.m., Jeb Bush saying 5 p.m., but even those folks at the election division saying they're hoping they're going to have the final results by tomorrow afternoon. But we're already seeing some problems. For example, one county came forward with some results, then they said, hold on, we don't want to give you those results yet because we forgot to count some votes. So I'd be surprised if all of the recounting is done as early as tomorrow afternoon, but that's what they're promising.
And Dan Abrams, we know you'll stay on top of it. Thank you for that. And to our audience, just a reminder here, what we're talking about is the recount phase of this. Say nothing of any challenges that may be mounted here. All right, we've mentioned the hours taking their toll. Let's go quickly to West Palm announcing their recount numbers for their part of this puzzle that is the state of Florida.
Presidential election
as well as the District 22 Congressional District, which were also conducted as required by law. The unofficial results of the recount revealed the following. In the presidential race, as to the number of votes on November 7th, 2000 for Gore, 268,945. Based on the recount this evening, the number is 269,696. That is a additional 751 votes. For Bush, on November 7th, 152,846. Based on the recount this evening, the total is 152,954. That is plus 108. As to the District 22 congressional race, for Mr. Shaw, the votes as of November 7th were 36,714. Based on the recount, the total is 36,718. That is plus 4 votes. As to Bloom, from November 7th, the total is 26,875. Based on the recount, the total is 26,872. That is minus 3 votes. Now, these results are expected to be certified at some point tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Judge Bergen, how can you make the difference between the 751?
All right, I just want to briefly respond, and of course, these are the major difference in the vote numbers deal with the little tabs on the back of the voting cards. And occasionally when a person votes and the tabs do not get all the way pushed out, depending on when they're run through the machine, they can be flipped down and be open and the vote would count. They could also close back up as they're run through the machine and then the vote doesn't count.
All right.
That primarily accounts for the difference.
Now we're into the arcane procedure of voting in some parts of the state of Florida. What all this means is, and these are all partial results now, as we get county on top of county. Chris Matthews with us. This means really a net gain of perhaps, what, 1,000 votes for Gore since we first thought. What's the practical effect so far?
He's made up half what he has to make. He's made it up already, and they're not even halfway through the counting. We're going to have to decide what the impact is of various sizes of counties and whether they're more Democratic or Republican. But the argument that they automatically should have a recount when the election's this close has already been made effectively and proven that it's a good thing to do, because obviously we have these technical problems of the perforation not being complete, of a little piece of cardboard being left on the card that prevents it from being counted accurately. That's led to, I've got a number here of about 1,000. It looks like they're made up already.
Exactly. They're up a net gain of 994 to be exact.
I have that same number myself.
All right, Chris Matthews, we'll be back with you as this hour progresses. Let's check in with both of these campaigns, specifically our correspondent covering them. Campbell Brown, will begin with you and the Bush campaign before we get to Chip Reed. Campbell, how's this all going to be viewed out there?
Well, they're watching and waiting, Brian. It's frankly a quiet night here in Austin. No one celebrating yet, but they hope to be this time tomorrow night. Advisors have been telling us all day they feel like there's nothing they can do right now except wait, but they believe tomorrow, when this recount is complete, that Governor George W. Bush will be President-elect Bush. And one sign of their confidence is what we started hearing today, is that the senior advisors, the highest level advisors in the campaign, are already gearing up, beginning to work on transition. Sources are telling NBC News that Dick Cheney, Bush's running mate, will head the transition, and that the names being talked about, and these won't come as any surprise, Brian, Secretary of State Colin Powell, Dr. Condoleezza Rice, who's been Bush's foreign policy advisor throughout the campaign as national security advisor, Andrew Card, former transportation secretary, leading the list for White House chief of staff. Governor Bush today spent most of the day at the mansion, but did come out and speak to reporters and conveyed his belief that he has won this election.
This morning brings news from Florida that the final vote count there shows that Secretary Cheney and I have carried the state of Florida. And if that result is confirmed in an automatic recount, as we expect it will be, that we have won the election. The recount is already underway, and I understand the Secretary of State of Florida has announced to the media that it will be completed by 5 p.m. tomorrow. We have asked former United States Secretary of State James Baker to travel to Florida on our behalf. He's a man of impeccable credentials and integrity, and someone the American people can trust to make sure the outcome is finalized as quickly as possible and in a calm and thoughtful manner. The strength of our American democracy was displayed in this exciting election. This was a close contest that produced a huge turnout. I want to thank all the supporters who worked hard on our behalf. I also want to thank the Vice President's supporters for their hard work and their belief in their cause. I want to assure them that should the election go the way that we think it will, that I will work hard to earn their confidence.
Now, for all their optimism, Brian, one advisor did concede tonight that there is concern about a court challenge to the recount, the final recount numbers. They recognize that the Gore campaign will leave no stone unturned and that they have to be at least mentally prepared for the fact that this could go well beyond tomorrow. Brian?
All right, Campbell Brown, thanks, and thanks for your superb work as well. So we have seen already tonight, roughly a net gain, Chip Reed, of 1,000 for Gore. This is exactly why, I suspect you're going to say, they sent a team of 50 people to Florida.
Absolutely. And Brian, of course, they would love it if that team didn't even have to do any work, if simply by the recount itself they came out on top. And if you look at the numbers so far, it would look like that's a possibility. But the truth is they don't expect that to happen. They think that that would be wishful thinking, and they think they're going to have to do the hard work of, as Campbell said, looking under every stone for votes. And they may have to file some legal challenges, and this may be a very long and arduous process. That is something that Vice President Gore made very clear when he appeared here in this room earlier today. Let's listen.
What is at issue here is the fundamental fairness of the process as a whole. Because of what is at stake, this matter must be resolved expeditiously, but deliberately and without any rush to judgment. Despite the fact that Joe Lieberman and I won the popular vote, under our Constitution, it is the winner of the Electoral College who will be the next president. Our Constitution is the whole foundation of our freedom, and it must be followed faithfully.
Now, Brian, they are making very clear that they think that they do need to move expeditiously, but they do not believe there should be any kind of rush to judgment. And the Vice President also made clear there that he said that this is something that they need to do in a very meticulous way. And that is why they are sending Warren Christopher, and he will be reporting to Bill Daley. Bill Daley is the campaign chairman, Warren Christopher, former Secretary of State. They also were on the stage today, and they both spoke to us. Let's listen to them.
There's no question he is ahead in the popular vote and ahead in the electoral vote. There is one state left to be decided. We believe when those votes are counted and that process is complete, totally complete, Al Gore will have won the Electoral College and the popular vote, and therefore will be the next president.
This is really an extraordinary event. Last night was an extraordinary night. None of us have ever seen anything quite like it. But I don't have any reason to think we're on the edge of a constitutional crisis. And we don't intend to try to provoke a constitutional crisis. We want to ensure, as I said before, that the election in Florida, as well as the election in the whole country, was accurately and fairly counted, and to do that in a timely manner.
So, two elements in all of that. Number one, they say they think they're going to win. Number two, they think they need time to do it. Take those two elements, add a bunch of lawyers, shake it up, and you get a long and arduous process. Brian?
All right, Chip Reed, thanks for your work as well. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we've just learned Jesse Jackson calling for a noon rally in West Palm by members of the clergy and others. Let's talk about the political ramifications of this recount. What has happened here? What's unfolding? Julian Bond, chairman of the board of the NAACP, with us right after a break.
Do you need this much space to feel comfortable?
Out election night because they had more than one vote for president. Those votes were nullified and not included in the count. One county commissioner saying the number 19,000 is high. There are problems in Florida. That's the understatement of the evening. Let's bring in Julian Bond, chairman of the board of the NAACP. Mr. Bond, good evening. What is the NAACP doing in this effort, and do you think you've got the goods to prove a Gore victory?
Well,
You know, we're really not interested in the Gore victory. We're interested in making sure the votes of all the people who cast votes are counted and counted fairly. We're nonpartisan. We don't urge people to vote for any candidate or against any candidate. But even before we found out Florida was going to be so crucial in this outcome, on yesterday, in the middle of the day, we were getting complaints about irregularities in Florida as well as in Ohio and New Jersey and other states around the country. But these seem to be particularly crucial because they do affect the outcome. Who's going to be the next president of the United States? We're prepared to, first of all, gather all the evidence. We've got scattered reports. I don't know if there are enough reports of votes turned away, of voters whose ballots were spoiled because of the bad design of the ballot and a number of other kind of complaints to turn the election one way or the other. But what's important is that those people deserve to have their votes counted and counted for the candidate they intended to vote for.
Perhaps we should define an irregularity as you define it, because voters being turned away is quite different in procedure than votes being discarded, ballots being discarded because of a double punch, I guess.
Because of a double punch, irregularities such as voters being given pencils, not pens, to sign in. Pens are required. You know, you don't want something that can be erased. Ballot boxes disappearing, then reappearing as if by magic. Policemen at the polling place stopping black men, asking for their identification. These rise a little above irregularities. These aren't the normal mix-ups one sees in American elections. These really threaten the integrity of the process, and they've got to be settled so that if Joe Blow or John Smith is the next president of the United States, those of us who voted for John and those of us who voted against him can be satisfied that we had a fair shot at choosing who won.
Let's back up because you mentioned an intimidation tactic of what many define as the Old South. What evidence have you, and where did it happen, and who was stopped that police officers were stopping black men?
It happened in Hillsborough County. A sheriff's deputy was posted outside the polls. The deputy was observed asking black men for identification and allegedly turning them away after checking their records, claiming that they were convicted felons and not eligible to vote. This is a report that we have. We want to find out if there's truth to it. Were these men convicted felons, not allowed to vote? Why was the policeman there? Who put him there? Were people frightened away by the presence of this policeman? This is an old tactic. We're not talking about burning crosses and bombs and dynamite sticks. We're talking about voter suppression, frightening people away from the polls. It ought not be tolerable in modern-day Florida. It ought not be tolerable anywhere.
All of this, of course, if true, would have to have someone behind it, would have to have motivation behind it.
You have to ask yourself who gains, who profits, who wins. We don't know. I say we're nonpartisan. We're not flinging any charges. We're not charging fraud or any kind of criminal illegality in many of these instances. We're not making any charges. I think people have to judge for themselves.
And what, in the end, is the NAACP going to do, and to whom do you present your evidence?
We have, on yesterday, been in contact with the Department of Justice over a series of complaints, some of them similar to these, coming from scattered parts of the United States. Even before we knew this election would come down to the wire, we're in touch with them today, earlier today. We have observers in Florida, our own people there. I don't know where this will go, whether lawsuits are in the offing, but we want to gather as much information as we can and see what the facts are. I think everybody wants to know.
Julian Bond is chairman of the board of the NAACP. Thank you very much for coming on the broadcast tonight. We have established one thing here tonight, and that is this story won't end tomorrow, final number or not. We're going to be back. We have a lot to talk about tonight with the members of our panel right after this.
Our business has always been about the direct relationship with the customer. That's what it's always about. What do you want to use a computer for?
I guess the biggest priority is getting online.
I want to make home movies and edit them on the computer.
I'd like to know what I should buy for a teacher.
Give us a call and tell us what you want to do. We'll set you up with a Gateway Essential PC, Intel Celeron processor, and a Year of America Online, all for under $23 a month. Because in Gateway Country, people rule.
That's what it's all about.
Papa, the ref is blind. Bang! Penalty! That wasn't our penalty.
MCI lets you call Western Europe for just 9 cents a minute all weekend long, so you can get great low rates at home and abroad.
Noi ragazzi Merci.
Call 1-800-476-SAVE to sign up now and get 1 hour of free calling to anywhere in the world.
My finances are all over the place. You've got your checking account out of New York, a credit card statement that comes out of Delaware. I've got stocks here, stocks there. There was times when I didn't know where my money was. Well, now I just go to onmoney.com and I can see and manage everything. It's so much less paper to handle, so we're saving a lot of trees. It organized all my accounts in one place.
Managing your whole financial life is easier when you get your money connected at onmoney.com.
Now I've got all my ducks in a row.
Buying a carpet deep cleaner can be confusing. You may think they have steam or heat the water, but in fact, they don't. Presenting the Bissell Pro Heat, the only upright deep cleaner with a built-in heater, which makes the hot tap water up to 25 degrees hotter, so it cleans better than all its competitors. Bissell, we mean clean. Now get the improved cleaning power of real heat in a handy portable. Introducing the Bissell Little Green Pro Heat.
面白いね。美味しそうだよ。
ガラスのクライアントからお電話。
Hello, Mr. Buffalo. Thank you for the nice gift pack of beef jerky. Beef jerky. Thank you.
Gee, wish I could take credit, but I didn't send you all any jerky.
You didn't?
Well, no. The last gift I sent you was that box of filet mignons about 2 months ago. Y'all got that, didn't you?
Shipping internationally.
You're there?
Next time use FedEx and be absolutely sure.
Hello?
There's been a charge on this broadcast tonight of voter intimidation at least one polling place in Florida or en route tonight. 2 former U.S. Secretaries of State, at least 100 out-of-town lawyers, and Jesse Jackson calling for a rally tomorrow by members of the clergy and others. And let's not forget here, this is all about electing a president. It leads us to Chris Matthews and our panel. Chris.
Right, well, let's go over a couple of facts just for those joining us right now. We are in an incredible situation, a country that saw 105 million people vote yesterday. Not a bad showing for any democracy. 105 million people showed up, and now the election, which pivots now on the state of Florida's 25 electoral votes, will be decided in the state of Florida in an election which is now, because of the recounting, going down to about 700 votes. We've had 994 votes reversed. They now go to Gore. They had been counted for Bush. There was about a 1,700 vote advantage for Bush. That's shrunk now below, well below that figure. It's down to about 700 votes now in favor of Bush. It's that close. Let's go to Carl Bernstein, who's been joining us now. Hasn't had a chance to talk yet. Carl, speak your mind, sir. How's this look to you as a man who's studied political history?
Well, I think there's an important element to the story that hasn't been discussed yet. And I've been on the phone most of the day with people in Nashville and with people in the Bush campaign. And that element is that the Gore campaign believes very strongly that they suspect that this election was stolen from them. And that's the word.
Based on what evidence? My favorite phrase tonight.
That's exactly the right question, because whenever one of these people would use the word stolen with me, I would say, well, what evidence would you have? And they would then begin to recite the kinds of things that Julian Bond just did.
But one of them, at least, is bogus. We know by now there was no ballot box that was left behind in a school. That was a box of crayons or something or other, and it was bogusly described as a box of ballots. So what is Julian Bond talking about? What were those people in Nashville talking about today?
Again, I don't come to this as a partisan in one way or another. What I'm trying to do is to describe an atmosphere and a subtext to this whole story, and that is the deep suspicions of the Gore campaign and the absolute terrible enmity between these two candidates that can't be paved over with this nice
Could it be they have a
we're
religious
seeing.
belief in the Zogby poll, which turned out to be immaculately successful in states like Pennsylvania, in states like Michigan, and turned out nationally to be correct against all the other polls? I doubted Zogby. Zogby's been true in every case except Florida. Is that why they figure Florida really did go for their guy Al Gore, because the poll said he would?
I don't know the answer to that question. What I do know is that these two men deeply dislike each other. It was reflected in their phone call last night. They have each sent in their troops to Tallahassee, and this is going to be a process that is going to be quite unlike anything we've ever seen. And part of the strategy of the Bush camp is to create an air of inevitability that Governor Bush succeeds to the presidency, therefore talking about the transition and we're ready to take office, et cetera, et cetera. There is a lot of psychological warfare going on here, and there is a lot of reporting that needs to be done by the press, which incidentally did not perform very well last night. We don't know where we are.
Carl, let me go to Nora Dunn. You've been in contact with the Gore people. They really are a tough group of customers. They don't brook opposition from the press or anywhere, I've noticed over the last several months. Is this a kind of a near religious belief that he won the Florida vote even before it was recounted?
Yes, and that he has won
based
the popular
upon
vote,
what evidence?
That he won the popular vote, which we do know, which everybody knows that he won the popular vote, and that he did well in Florida, that they deserve a recount. There are also.
But they say they believe he won in Florida. What's that based on, that belief?
That's a good question.
Well, Nora said it's a religious belief, and religious belief is not based on evidence. It is based on no evidence whatsoever. It's based on faith. But look, it would be nice if what we were waiting for were the ballots.
Why have elections if we have religious belief in the results?
If we were waiting for the ballots from some place that hadn't had recent massive voter fraud. That's what we had in the mayoral election in Miami in 1997. That's what 2 courts found. Massive, extensive, well orchestrated was the court's phrase for the voter fraud in Miami.
In what community was that fraud perpetrated? What ethnic community was that?
In the Miami mayoral election.
Right.
And all of the absentee ballots were thrown out of the race by the courts. It is in that state, in that place, where we have this gap now of a few hundred votes.
Let's talk about the larger gap. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we only have so much time tonight. And this is the larger question in this latest Wire story, AP story coming out of West Palm Beach. Election officials said that 19,000 ballots in the county were nullified because they showed more than one vote for president. Now, you can only make 2 assumptions there. The people are balloon heads, and 19,000 people voted for 2 guys for president, or there's real corruption here, and some election officials got together and said, why don't we nullify 19,000 ballots by punching them a second time? Pat, you've studied this.
It's already been evidenced by these older women and men who we've had on the program who did not understand this butterfly ballot. They couldn't understand where to punch the hole.
But 19,000 people punched both. There's no explanation for punching both for president. If you find out you punched the wrong one, you go to the election official and say, give me another ballot. You don't punch it. Well, they certainly must have. They punched 2 that one won't count.
Chris, you don't know. With that number, it's a lot of people.
It sure is.
The truth of the matter is, I want to go back to, again, the reality of elections. If you go and look at the number of people who actually turn out to vote in an election and whose votes get counted in every state in America, there's an interesting and significant gap. That gap is made up of people who go in and make mistakes, either double punch ballots, double vote on ballots, and whatever. Now,
why would anyone presume that the second punch they punched would count if the first one wouldn't count? Why would anybody make that assumption?
I'm not a mind reader. I'm telling you,
can't understand the technology. The technology
is not simple.
But Chris, Carl, jump in. Carl, I'm sorry. We have to everyone in here. Carl, go ahead.
I actually wasn't going to jump in. Go right ahead.
Okay, I'll jump in. What's interesting is the ground war that's developing. The number of people that are flying to Palm Beach, the calls that are being made in Washington to K Street to lobbyists from the Gore campaign. We need to raise $3 million in 2 days to fight this type of a war. This is not over. This is fascinating. They are putting everything behind this battle.
Democrats believe in the strengths and weaknesses of both parties. And I know this as a Democrat, as a former Democratic consultant. We believe that we are really best when we get in one of these recount situations, that we run all over the Republicans in these. And
because Democrats are more
aggressive about it, and we
more litigious, tougher inside fighters,
and have been at it
more. The Democrat is picking up votes, and the Republican isn't.
But they're both picking up. But we don't know. All right, let me back up and make it very precise, Lawrence, for you. What I'm saying is we have these large counties right now. We've had Broward, Dade, and I believe in Palm Beach. We have, in some counties, we've had Bush has picked up. He's not picked up as much. We've had no net loss here. We've actually had a gain in both candidates' totals. You've had
a 1,000 vote erosion in the Bush advantage.
Please, let me finish my
Gore is gaining. This is closing. That's what's happening in the recount. Couldn't be simpler.
Let me finish my point. They're both gaining votes. Gore is gaining more votes. What's happened since last night is both candidates' totals are going up, and Gore's are going up more. We have 28 counties. We have the big counties. We don't know which counties are out and how it goes. And by the way, tomorrow we'll have an answer of how many of that is, and then we'll have the question of what's left with the overseas ballots. How many they think there's still coming in.
That may well be a pro-Republican
But
batch of ballots.
the fact is, what they're finding is the total vote is going up in both, more for Gore right now than Bush,
Okay.
but they both gained votes.
And the beat goes on, Brian. Back to Brian
All right,
Williams.
Chris, thank you, and my apologies for twice referring to Florida as California so far tonight. The night is young, of course. When we come back, some perspective on all of this, where it will land with the thud of history, and the new look U.S. Senate awaiting you in Washington when we continue.
Are you ready? What if your kid gets into Harvard? What if your mom needs long-term care? What if both happen at the same time? Scudder Investments can help to prepare you for what you want or whatever comes. Contact us or your financial advisor. What if? Be ready.
The drawing rooms of London had not prepared us for this new world. We were overcome by the very fruits and birds and trees.
British classics.
The air was thick with perfume.
A marriage of Victorian elegance and Caribbean soul.
The seduction was complete. It changed us forever.
With the simple finance plan, you can enter the world of British classics gracefully. Only at Ethan Allen.
Samsung joyfully introduces the world as you make it, where our digital technology has one job: to make life more fun. We want to thrill you, connect you, charm you, satisfy you, and delight you.
Everyone's invited
To the Samsung digital experience.
You going bald? Here's good news. Rogaine, Propecia, and the latest advances in hair transplantation are helping thousands of men and women regrow their hair. Which solution is right for you? Now, the nation's leading medical group in the treatment of hair loss is offering a free video that helps you decide. Call Medical Hair Restoration toll-free now, 1-888-900-HAIR, and ask for your free video. Using 3D animation and graphics, the video explains what causes hair loss and why hair transplantation works. You'll also learn the latest facts about Rogaine and Propecia treatments. Interviews with doctors and patients will give you the information you need to make an informed decision. Isn't it time you did something about your hair loss? Take the first step. Call Medical Hair Restoration toll-free now, 1-888-900-HAIR for your free video. That's toll-free, 1-888-900-HAIR.
As our discussion of this continues, again, those just joining us, we have no president-elect. This effort to elect a president is right now dead in the water, pending a recount in the state of Florida. We are joined by Alan Lichtman, who is a historian and joins us from Washington, where he is affiliated with American University. Alan, Carl Bernstein just took a swipe at the news media. It's been pointed out during the day today that the various news media probably deserve a good public spanking for what went on last night. After all, they had Florida called wrongly, not once, but twice. Do you wish to have at it as well?
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And it's not just a technological glitch, Brian. There's a much bigger issue here. I think the entertainment culture has taken over the way the media cover our politics. They have to have poll-driven horse races. We see that's now the way they cover presidential elections. They pay for their own polls, and they cover their polls continuously as news, as though a race was taking place when a race really hasn't started. Now we have to have poll-driven drama and horse races on election night with competition and a rush to get into prime time with these premature calls. And as a result, I believe the media has inserted itself far too much as part of the political process rather than simply as an impartial observer and analyst of the political process. If we've got to go back to waiting for the counts, so be it. I think it's far better than last night's fiasco.
Alan, I'm told Carl Bernstein is still hooked up with us by satellite. Carl, what's your beef on this count?
Well, I agree totally. In fact, I spoke with a group of Republicans and Democrats at a lunch today. My point being that there is no reasonable excuse for us relying on polled projections. There is no reason that we cannot wait until the results are counted. This is all about a kind of ridiculous competition as to whether CNN or NBC or CBS calls a state 3 minutes before the other. Why the hell can't we wait until people have voted and count real existing votes? This is crazy already, and it's reflective of a kind of arrogance that people hold us in the press responsible for, and unfortunately, it gives them the impression that this is how we usually do our business, when most of the time we do our business pretty well. And then we do boneheaded things like asking for this kind of special treatment.
We also had the strange occurrence last night. Television networks, usually with many puffed out chest feathers and much pride, point out that they wait until poll closings to call a state. You got Florida, which is a 2-time zone state, that went early for the 2nd time zone. I want to roll the following report by NBC News correspondent Andrea Mitchell, which she prepared for NBC Nightly News tonight, because it provides some perspective and takes a look at, in part, why what happened last night happened last night.
For the 2nd time in one night, the election's most critical state is projected incorrectly.
We don't just have egg in our face, we've got omelet all over our suits.
It all starts 8 hours earlier. The networks award Florida to Gore, even before all the votes are counted.
A big call to make. CNN announces that we call Florida in the Al Gore column.
How is that done? Every election day, the networks jointly interview people after they vote and compare those exit polls with actual results to determine trends and help project winners. But last night, a major glitch. When the vote is counted, Bush is ahead, not Gore.
There are all kinds of things that can happen. We can have a data entry problem. Somebody puts a number in incorrectly. We can have incorrect counts being reported.
2:17 a.m. and
so at 2:17 a.m., using identical computer results, all the networks switch, give Florida to Bush. That puts him over the top, makes him president-elect. But less than 2 hours later, another turn. The Bush lead narrows. Now it's too close to call.
It's a fallible system. People did not make those calls deliberately because no one would put their reputation or the reputation of their network or the reputation of their news divisions on the line by a deliberate mistake.
In fact, the Florida vote is so close, experts say a mistake is not surprising. And it's happened before. 40 years ago, another all-nighter.
At 7:19 a.m. Eastern Time, Senator Kennedy was elected President of the United States. The NBC Victory Desk has just given California to Kennedy, and that gives him the election.
David Brinkley was right about Kennedy becoming president, but wrong about California. That state eventually went to Nixon. And again, 24 years ago, Jimmy Carter makes fun of a newspaper headline showing him losing the Wisconsin primary. In fact, he won.
Many people say the real issue isn't why projections, often involving paper ballots, are sometimes wrong, but the archaic vote counting system that can lead to mistakes or even fraud. Brian?
All right, Andrea Mitchell from New York tonight. And Alan Lichtman, we go back to you. What about staggered poll closing times with time zones across the country?
Well, you know, this creates all kinds of problems with staggered poll closings because votes are being projected. In fact, once Florida was projected, and Pennsylvania and Michigan, a lot of analysts were saying Gore has this election absolutely wrapped up.
Right.
Who knows what effect that might have had on votes that were going on. Two other quick points, I think, that came out of that story. Number one, you heard what Andrea said, and that they gave the election to Bush.
Right.
The networks don't give the election to anyone. They do not certify electoral college votes. Only the individual states certify electoral college votes. Secondly, you heard the technology simply will not sustain what they are trying to do. There are multiple sources of error. No matter how careful they are, fiascos like Florida are likely to repeat themselves in the future with perhaps equally disastrous results.
So, Carl Bernstein, this was a good lesson probably that networks as a group are non-binding entities.
We've had many lessons in the past, and we don't seem to learn from them. There were about 5 other calls last night in state races that were also wrong, and there are every 2 and 4 years. The real thing is, let's be logical about this. we go on the air at 7 o'clock, we're off by 2 or 3 with real results. Why in the world can't we go in real time? There is just no excuse for this anymore. And there's another thing. It leads to mischief by the candidates or understandable movement by the candidates to try and affect those other time zones. That was one of the things that George Bush did last night when he went on the air shortly before 10 o'clock, I believe was the hour. He was trying, among other things, to get more votes out in the Florida panhandle by saying, hey, this thing isn't over yet, like the guys on television said. Get out there and vote for me.
All right, Carl Bernstein, Alan Lichtman, gentlemen, thank you both very much for coming on. We're going to take a break. When we come back, is this now going to be good times for the folks like Rush Limbaugh if a Republican wins up in the White House? Is it freedom after 8 years in the wilderness? We'll hear from Rush Limbaugh right after this.
What is the technology behind broadband? Texas Instruments Programmable DSP. Technology that transforms telephone lines into DSL internet pipelines. From the world leader in DSP and analog, Texas Instruments.
No two eyes see the same world. No two businesses are identical. And now, one company creates internet solutions unique to you.
Fujitsu. The possibilities are infinite.
About mid-caps and mid-cap funds. Does Fidelity have a mid-cap fund?
Oh, yeah, we sure do. Fidelity's mid-cap stock fund generally invests in companies valued between 1 and 15 billion.
Suppose I wanted to buy an individual mid-cap stock instead of a mutual fund.
You could do either. Fidelity's known for mutual funds, but it's also one of the largest online brokerage firms in the world.
Well, great. So I could either buy the fund or go straight into a stock.
That's exactly right.
Well, thank you. I've learned something today.
To invest, call, click, or visit Fidelity.
So that's it then? You're just quitting?
Well...
Well, what?
Well, actually, I'd like to hire you.
Imagine what the Journal could do for you. The Wall Street Journal and WSJ.com.
A man who won't give up and a man who won't back down are about to test the depths of courage. In 2 days, Robert De Niro.
What makes you try so hard?
Cuba Gooding Jr.
Because they said I couldn't have it.
Men of Honor. Rated R.
As you might imagine, it was the talk of talk radio today, these goings-on in the race for president. The fact that we cannot accurately report to you tonight a president-elect. We have 2 radio hosts, snippets of which we rolled on today during their shows. Rush Limbaugh nationally and Joe Madison in the Baltimore-Washington area.
Here's the thing. You have to win majorities in enough states to win the Electoral College and consequently to win the presidency. That's the way our Constitution has worked for 213 years. For any presidential candidate or hand-wringing pundits, it is set forth in Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution, the Electoral College. Now, the question is going to be put to me, Rush, if the shoe were on the other foot, and if Bush had received a larger popular vote than Al Gore, but Al Gore appeared to be winning the Electoral College, wouldn't you be arguing against this outcome? Wouldn't you be sounding the way the Democrats are? If Bush won the popular vote but lost the Electoral College, wouldn't you be out there creaming the Electoral College? No. So there's my answer to those of you who think that I might be acting like the Democrats are right now if the shoe were on the other foot. I was asked that last Friday, and I'm sure that George W. Bush would concede, congratulate Gore, and move on. We wouldn't threaten lawsuits. We wouldn't try to get the public all worked up into a frenzy. But how are the Democrats dealing with it? How are certain members of the press dealing with it? I don't think they're dealing with it as maturely and as constitutionally, if I may say so, as you just heard me deal with it. Well, we, ladies and gentlemen, stand for the Constitution and the rule of law. Otherwise, we cease to be a republic. We can't change the Constitution after the fact because something happens we don't like guns and the Second Amendment and so forth. Now, they try, but we can't because we don't agree with the outcome of some election. We are only stewards of our Constitution. It belongs to future generations. Now, whether the issue is high crimes and misdemeanors or the Electoral College, we embrace the Constitution, and that means all of it. It appears that some on the other side are not prepared to embrace all the Constitution, but we're not surprised because they've been trying to read out portions of it they haven't liked for quite a long time. And they've been trying to read in portions of the Constitution that aren't even there. I'm just warning you and setting you up for what's going to happen on this Electoral College stuff.
The View from the Right from his live radio program earlier today. For rebuttal tonight, we had a conversation earlier this evening with liberal radio talk show host Joe Madison.
People have a right to go to the polls without being intimidated like they were in Chicago, where police officers stopped young African Americans for taking people to the polls, saying they didn't have a license to transport them. I think the people in Palm Beach have a responsibility and the right to know that they can use a ballot that is fair and easy to understand. And Rush Limbaugh, if this was the shoe was on the other foot, as big as his feet are, quite candidly, he would be sounding like Muhammad Ali, that Bush is the champion of the people. And I bet you anything he would be calling for a constitutional amendment to change the Electoral College. So it is about our constitutional rights. You cannot intimidate people. You cannot go around losing ballot boxes, misplacing them. So I think that what you're hearing here is typical right-wing rhetoric. It's double standard. The reality is that I think that Gore is going to carry Florida, and quite honestly, it will make this whole argument moot. This is not something new. There are laws on the books. There may be violations of the 1965 Voting Rights Act, which, by the way, many conservatives want to eliminate. So you do what you would normally do, and that is that you simply enforce the laws that are on the books. I think that this thing is going to get down to a very thin margin. And tomorrow we're going to have a president of the United States, and I believe it's going to be Gore. And then what I think is going to happen is you'll see Bush not wanting to concede, and then probably they will take certain actions, legal or otherwise. So this will be interesting between now and the weekend.
The rebuttal from Joe Madison. And when we come back, look what they've done to the U.S. Senate.
Today's companies are moving at high speeds towards e-commerce solutions. Today's companies move to Ohio because E also means enterprise and expertise. Ohio is the E-Corridor, the place where Rittal Corporation found the resources to become the largest enclosure manufacturer in the world.
Discover how Ohio's E-Corridor can help you locate or expand your business.
The future, your company's future, is in Ohio, the E-Corridor. Don't miss your stop.
Hello? Is that my toothbrush?
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
It doesn't matter how you get the idea for your online business, but it does matter where you register the name. Network Solutions. Visit us online to register yours.
Microfinished camshafts and lightweight pistons mean less friction. Less friction means more power. More power means suddenly the speed of light doesn't seem so fast anymore. The Infinity i30. It's all the best thinking.
Shopping for your favorite golfer has never been easier. The Wooden Putter in Grandview has the most distinctive selection of golf gifts, art, apparel, and memorabilia around. Gifts any golfer would love. Our fashions for the fairway include Bobby Jones, EP Pro, Sport Haley, and Sunderland Sportswear. Convenient hours and an accessible location make shopping easy and affordable. So when you need a gift for a golfer, remember, the Wooden Putter. Fine gifts for golfers. Only a chip away from Grandview and West 5th Avenues.
This was last night, the new senator-elect. She'll be the first woman to represent the state of New York in the U.S. Senate. She also happens to be a sitting first lady. And as we go to the panel, Chris Matthews, you've got Nora O'Donnell over there. Let's talk about the new makeup of the new U.S. Senate.
Nora, let's go through it. It's are the Democrats going to run the Senate?
We're waiting to see. The current lineup is 50 Republicans, 49 Democrats. That's because we're waiting to hear the results of Washington State, where former Congresswoman Maria Cantwell is in a tight race with Senator Slade Gordon. They called that the clash of the cyber titans because both of them represent or are close with Microsoft and Real Networks. The problem there is there's 750,000 absentee ballots still to be counted. That also includes the presidential race. But Democrats think they're going to win that seat. If they do, it will be 50-50. That is the first time since 1881 there has been an even split. But either way you cut it, whoever wins the White House.
Depends how you count it. In 1953, you had it in effect an even split. In effect, because you had an independent who voted with the Republicans. Let me ask you this. Even if they get 50-50, they still face a problem because Joe Lieberman, if he's elected vice president, will have to give up a seat to a Republican, no doubt. If he's not elected, and it is 50-50, then you have Dick Cheney as the president of the United States Senate, who will find for the Republicans, let them organize. So there's no way the Democrats can organize the Senate this year.
There is no way the Democrats can, but they are talking about different scenarios today in what was a very cocky news conference. Senator Daschle and Senator Torres.
What scenario would lead them to leadership?
Retirements or health retirements from Republican senators.
Oh, well, are they negotiating those things now? Let's go to Pat.
I want to go to another point because it was something.
They're talking about it. I'm just telling you.
Amazing. They're speculating like ghouls.
Well, it's also true that in 2002.
Doing this for voters. Why not for?
Yeah,
why not
they're already
for
calculating who's going to die in the next
Yeah.
year and who can get a chairmanship.
Let me just pick up on something
Sure.
Nora said
Thank
that's
you.
very
Thank you, Nora.
important, which is about this popular vote, and just lay something on the table that not that will be remembered very often. But in 1960, John Kennedy left election night with a 500,000 vote lead. Over the next, it takes usually, it'll take at least 2 weeks before, or more, often 2 to 3 weeks before we have all of the popular vote in. The Gore lead went from, because of California, from 400,000 now under 200,000. There are 750,000 votes, you said, in Washington. There are at least 300,000 or more in Oregon. There are over 1 million votes just in those two states alone to be counted. But one of, Chris, you pointed out to me yesterday, and it's something that Curtis Gann, who studies the American electorate and turnout, wrote last week. Because of this bizarre campaign, which we decided we had 18 or 15 battleground states, and everybody then wrote off the other states, we didn't have a really proportional turnout. We didn't have a national turnout. His speculation last week, and they're figuring out the numbers now, was that we got probably a big boost in turnout in the states where it was competitive, the money, the effort, the candidate time, and in the smaller states, in South Carolina, for instance, or Rhode Island, unless there was a big race going on locally, or Hawaii, there was no incentive for people necessarily to vote.
So not every vote counts unless you live in those 14
but
states.
it also means that the popular vote was not
back to Brian. We have to get back to Brian. Thanks, Pat. Back to Brian.
Thank you. A reminder, this is the talk of the nation, this story. Stay with NBC News on MSNBC throughout this evening, throughout the day tomorrow, and we will see you again tomorrow evening. Our newscast is straight ahead. I'm Brian Williams, NBC News.
If he's talking about it,
we don't know who the next president's going to be at this point.
Everyone's talking about it. Imus in the Morning, weekdays 6 to 10 Eastern, only on MSNBC. Feeling out of your league when conversation turns to things that really matter? It's time to get off the bench and into the game.
Let's play hardball.
A fast-paced hour of politics, pop culture, and the day's headlines. Great debate with the smartest players on the field, live 5 nights a week. Hardball with Chris Matthews, weeknights 5 Eastern on MSNBC. Welcome to the big leagues.
747 with 179 people on board is totally engulfed in flames.
Renewed violence in the Middle East.
Israeli forces are striking back at Yasser Arafat.
Breaking news at this hour.
Belgrade, Yugoslavia, the parliament building is on fire. The terrorist attack of a USS naval vessel.
When news breaks, MSNBC takes you there 24 hours a day.
A very serious breaking news story.
MSNBC, we bring you the whole picture.
MSNBC, the whole picture.
On the radar loop this evening, rain and thunderstorms from the Gulf states to the Ohio Valley spreading northeast, even a little ice and snow on the western fringe of that storm. The forecast Thursday, rain and even some thunderstorms from the Mississippi on east, rain and snow showers from the central Rockies to the Pacific Northwest. Thursday will be quite chilly in much of the country west of the Mississippi, while it's mild in the east. Highs ranging from teens in Montana to 80s in Florida.